Hey guys, welcome to the first of probably many episodes I'm going to be shooting on this subject. Something that's been 6 years in the making and I've been meaning to do for a while, but I have been putting it off. A series of videos all culminating things I've learned about keto baking and different ingredients, from sweeteners to flours to thickeners and everything I've learned in the last 6 years. So first off, if you are new here, welcome. My name's Alycia. I'm a pastry chef with a sweet tooth. I spent most of my life in the restaurant business, but back in 2020, I started figuring out my own keto dessert recipes. So I have learned a lot since then, and I just had my 6-year anniversary of being on YouTube. So if you're watching this in the future, there's still maybe update videos to this and more things I've learned, because I feel like I have learned constantly over the last 6 years. Something new pretty much every day that I've been experimenting in the bakery. If you didn't know, I now own a keto gluten-free bakery that I opened up about 2 years after I started YouTube. So, like I said, this is the first video, which I don't know how many videos there's going to be yet, but they will all be in my informative baking playlist. I will have linked down below. Once I get all the videos done, I might make its own playlist, but today is the first one all about allulose. Yes, I gave allulose its own full video because there has been so much I have learned. And like, it just popped on the scene a couple of years ago, being real big. I've been using it a long time, but I have learned a lot in the past just year. So I wanted to put together this video, kind of putting everything I say in all my different videos where I've mentioned allulose or used allulose, putting all the tips and things I've learned into one video. So without further ado, allulose, what is it? It is a rare sugar that is found in nature. And I don't know about anybody else, but I find science insane and crazy, and I am really not a scientist. Like I said in the beginning, pastry chef all my life, didn't do well in school. So the science aspect of a lot of this stuff goes over my head, and I get comments all the time from people that know more than me that like actually understand this stuff. But I only get what I can read on Google and understand for myself. So it is found in like figs, raisins, molasses, maple syrup, but to produce it commercially, it is derived from corn, and it's a whole process it goes through a whole process to make allulose. All I know for sure is the baking aspect of it and how it works in my recipes, but it is only 70% as sweet as sugar. The body does not metabolize it as sugar. It passes right through, so there's no insulin spike. It's been even proven that if you add it to a carb-heavy meal of some kind, it will help blunt the response from the carbs that you're eating. So all around, a pretty good sugar substitute. The only downside, even for me, is digestive upset in too much, which kind of sucks because I love my ice cream and I love caramel and fudge, and I have allulose and all those things, and ice cream is like my weakness, and I want to make an ice cream sundae with, and my brownie has allulose in it too. So brownie sundaes with hot fudge and stuff like that, a lot of allulose. I usually end up with some digestive upset from it, but it makes the best, softest ice cream ever because it does not freeze solid. So I'm going to try to be clear and concise and not jump around too much. But speaking on the not freezing, it is humectant, which means it holds on to moisture, and hygroscopic, not hydroscopic. Apparently they're different things. I did not know that. But I have found this to be true in so many things, and it is the reason a lot of people have trouble with keto baking, because they don't understand these sweeteners and what they do in the baking process. So allulose holds on to moisture. So if you put a lot in a baked good, it will stay wet for a very long time. And then the other downside to allulose is it browns pretty fast. Like, it says it's a good substitute for sugar because it browns and caramelizes like sugar, which that's great for like cooking sugar and making caramels. But in actual baked goods, if they're a thick, bread loaf, like a zucchini bread or something like that, it'll take a really long time for the middle to get cooked, and the outside will tend to get very dark. A lot of times it isn't burnt, and it doesn't taste burnt, but it doesn't look nice. It looks burnt. But a lot of times it isn't. Like my bread, sometimes I've sliced it and toasted it and it went too far and it looks burnt, but it tasted fine still. But it never looks very appetizing to have anything too dark in color. So that's what allulose does to a lot of baked goods, which is why I don't use it in a ton of my, bready baked goods. I really wish that wasn't the case, and I could, because it does hold on to moisture and make things super soft and moist. So putting them in something like a zucchini bread would be delicious because it keeps it super soft. But again, sometimes too soft and makes things fall apart, like cookies. You just have to have the right ratio of other ingredients in order to combat the moisture content. So that's why it takes a lot of experimenting to figure out ways to use allulose in baked goods. I just haven't wanted to stray from my usual because I know my usual works. And that's one of the biggest things in my testing and stuff. Like test and test and test on something you don't know how it works exactly, or just do what you've always done and know it's going to come out good. So allulose is one of those tricky things. It doesn't bake up the same as sugar, where erythritol does. I'm not going into erythritol. That'll be another video, so make sure you hit the bell icon so you get notified when that video comes up. Make sure you're subscribed and you have all notifications turned on. Now, what do I use allulose for? Allulose is great for, like I said, the ice cream, things where we have to cook sugar. So like caramel sauces and my English toffee and gummy bears. Anything that is cooked sugar, it helps, because when you cook erythritol, it crystallizes. So allulose doesn't crystallize when it cools as long as there's no other foreign contaminants in there. If you put stevia into your mix and stuff like that, it could crystallize on you, but just the allulose by itself, it's not going to crystallize when it cools, unlike all the other sweeteners that are keto or low glycemic. So I often use allulose in like soft setting stuff, things like meringues and my fluff recipe and stuff like that. Pretty much any recipe where you have to cook sugar or heat something on the stove and stuff like that. My sweetened condensed milk, I tried over and over again to do sweetened condensed milk without allulose, and I always got a crystallized results. So that's what I love using allulose for. So going back to the fact that it's hygroscopic, right? It's so much easier to say hygroscopic. It's hygroscopic. I'll put it down here. Like the one time I used it on one of my cakes, I did a powdered monk fruit allulose blend in my buttercream and put it on my cake and put it into the fridge. And when I went to pull it out later to eat it, it was like wet on the outside. Like it drew out the moisture from the cake and from the refrigerator. So that's another reason I don't like using it for like my frostings and stuff like that. Also for coating things, like I found people were saying, my gummies, I rolled them in the citric acid and I used allulose and they got wet and melted. Allulose pulls moisture. It doesn't freeze solid in the freezer. Even if you make a super thick caramel and put it in the freezer, it just gets softer as you have it, open to the air in the freezer, open to the air in the refrigerator. If you put it on anything that has moisture in it, it draws it out. Like I did some experimenting with my keto Mexican wedding cakes, and I really wanted to use allulose because, erythritol has that cooling effect. So I was doing testing on doing powdered allulose on the outside, and it did get wet, which I was expecting. But when I went and ate the cookie, the inside was drier too. So not only does it pull things from the air, I believe it pulls moisture out of things also, which is a real bummer because keto baked goods tend to be dry already, or they can be, especially if you like over bake. So drawing out more moisture out of a cookie or something like that is a real bummer. So I scrapped the allulose idea. I did come up with something else to combat the cooling effect, but allulose just is not the right thing to coat any kind of pastry that needs to be coated, or sour gummies. So that is another thing that allulose isn't the best at. So it's like a double-edged sword where it's so great because it acts so much like sugar, but then it has these downsides that really cause a problem. And that's why I mention them in almost every video I'm using allulose. I mention the pitfalls because people just assume you can swap sweetener for sweetener, and that's not the case. So that's why I'm making this series. Now the downsides, now the upsides. So like I said, in baking, I never use a whole amount of allulose for the sugar substitute in baked goods, but I use it strategically in baking to add the moisture. So I add it in small amounts in things like my egg white bread or my muffin recipe, because it adds that little bit extra moisture you might need to combat having more dry ingredients. Like in my muffins, for things not to sink, it needs to be a little bit thicker of a batter. Yes, I tried all the other tricks to not having things sink. They still sink. So I added more flours, but that made things dry. Then in comes allulose to make it a little bit more moist. So I use it strategically in baking for those reasons. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the cooking. Now, cooking with allulose has been a learning curve over the last year. I have learned so much when I did my candy making in October of 2025. But like I said, allulose gets wet. Allulose always moves. Like, it never is completely solid. Even my English toffee, I have some in there. It took a long time, but it got wet. Just being in the refrigerator, it melts over time. So it was a real challenge to learn how to make things that would stay solid with allulose, like my payday bar and stuff like that. I know you have to add a lot of other ingredients in order to get it to be solid. Definitely look back on all those candy making videos. But besides that, with the cooking of allulose, I learned a lot. It has to do with your equipment and even just adding a different amount of water to cooking allulose. So I started learning a lot more when I went to using different equipment in a different setting. So I was up in my home kitchen doing my thing, using the same equipment over and over again, and then I went and got my own bakery where equipment was different, so things acted differently. Then I built this bakery and I had different equipment again. So one of the biggest things was the size of the pot you use to cook allulose and temperature reading, which I always use a laser thermometer to temp my allulose that I'm cooking. But I've learned over using different size pots that the number might not always reflect where your allulose is at. And I've had several people comment that their stuff burned before it hit the number on the thermometer. And that's one of the biggest things. It's so hard for me to know everything when I'm making things because I'm using the same pan over and over again. So when you have different pans at home, apparently the outcome changes. You know, it's not something I knew when I put those videos out, but I learned over using different pans, like when I made my keto butterfingers and I followed Duff's tutorial on making the sugar part of it, and he used a saute pan. So I used a saute pan and found out I could get it to read up to 360 degrees without it even being brown yet. But then people were burning it and their temperature was reading 320. So if they're using a small pot, the temperature was reading low, but it was caramelizing. So one of the biggest things I can mention is just going by color on the allulose. That's what I do now even, because when I double recipes, it also changes things. Like I mentioned in my corn syrup video, I'll link that up there. Just adding a little bit extra water when I doubled the recipe changed the color of the corn syrup and made it way thicker. Like, it wasn't reading the number, but it looked wrong, and I knew it was probably wrong because it was getting too dark, and I was right. It was getting too thick even though it wasn't reading the temperature I did the other batches at. Hey guys, popping in here from the future. I'm now editing this video in June and realized I left out kind of an important thing about cooking allulose, which is, yeah, it acts like sugar, but it doesn't cook like regular sugar. As soon as allulose melts, even at like 180 degrees, 200 degrees, it becomes a super thick syrup. Like I did a make your own allulose syrup video, so I'll link that up there for you. But once you add that syrup to water, it disappears. When normal sugar is cooked to 248 degrees, it is at like a softball stage, and when you put it into cold water, it forms a ball of sugar. Allulose just disappears. So that's one of the challenges that I've faced and learned over the last year. Like my English toffee recipe, you gotta take it so far in temperature compared to regular sugar. Regular sugar, hard crack, I'll put down the degrees down here. I don't know them by heart, but it's way lower than allulose. So when cooking allulose for something like a meringue or my marshmallows and stuff like that, I cook it at a higher temperature than you would need to cook regular sugar at. And that was the one video I really showed, that was my marshmallow, where I showed you the ice water and how allulose just literally disappears in water until you get it up above like 280 degrees. So that is a big difference between allulose and sugar. And the other thing, there are certain recipes I haven't been able to do because they don't work with erythritol and they don't work with allulose. And people have asked me several times about doing like a hard candy recipe, like candy canes and stuff like that. Like I said, it melts still. Even though it hard crack, if it's not covered in chocolate like my English toffee and it's exposed to the air, it gets wet and melts again. With it not getting hard ever, I've been trying to make meringues for so long, like the hard outside meringues with the soft marshmallowy inside. I've been trying that, and like pavlovas I've been wanting to make because it's such a good summertime dessert, just like a baked meringue with some fresh fruit and stuff like that. I haven't been able to do it with allulose, and with erythritol it just becomes a crystallized mess. People have been mentioning Tagatose to me, and I looked it up, and it is very similar to allulose, it looks like. It does say it's humectant, same as allulose, so I worry it's literally the exact same. But I am probably going to buy some to test just those couple of recipes I can't get with allulose. But it's twice as expensive. So if it's very similar to allulose and acts the same, I don't see buying something that's twice as expensive if it works exactly the same. So I'll definitely be reporting back on that. But I think that was the last thing I wanted to mention about allulose. So back to me in the past. So bottom line, allulose is a tricky sweetener to work with, and I'll probably be learning something new every single time I try to figure out a new recipe, because there is no keto baking course or people doing a book all about allulose. Like, allulose has been probably around forever, but hasn't been used in baking in the past. You know, we've been baking for a long time, but we haven't been using these rare sugars for more than like 10 years. So there's a ton to know and learn, and I'm sure I'll be learning more. It's May 2026 right now. That is what I have learned and know about using allulose in keto baking. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, let me know down in the comments below. Give me a thumbs up to let me know that you enjoyed this video. And if you have anything to add that I didn't say in this video about allulose that you have figured out, definitely let everyone know down in the comments below. My channel, I want to be a teaching channel. Like, I want to tell you everything I know so that you guys can have the best results possible and stick to a no sugar lifestyle. So don't forget, I have an Amazon shop page that has all the ingredients I use on a regular basis on there. If you hit my links and order, it definitely helps out the channel a lot. Subscribe if you haven't already. As always, I'll be back with many more keto, low carb, healthy meals, desserts, and snack recipes, and informative teaching videos. Bye guys. Happy keto baking and some yummy ice cream making with some allulose.